thinking this doesn't even need to be a full session right now. I think the main thing was exactly what Brandon just said, and maybe just for the recording, I'll just repeat it. It's just so that everyone has a clear understanding of the roadmap of what it is we're wanting to do together and over the next 4 weeks, so that you have some confidence when you're communicating with others what um, what the bioregional mapping is even going to involve and the steps to what defines a bioregional mapping workshop as opposed to um, creating the conditions for having these conversations. Like where those where does it sort of fall out of what we mean by bioregional mapping? Um, just so that there's clarity on that. And yeah, so that was the main purpose. And we really wanted to just open up and see what people were were needing once we'd outlined some of that. So there's a few more people that have just arrived. So maybe we can actually go into maybe starting with the grounding and then going into conversation and having as much conversation as people need. We don't even need to stay for the full allotted time, but if it's meant to be helpful to you. So how does that sound, Brandon?
Yeah, I think that sounds fine. I don't think we need to quantify anything before we get started. So I think why don't you start? I think starting with the grounding sounds great. And then
Yeah.
let's,
And I would love to invite anyone here who would like to step in to do a grounding, and maybe to be. I'd love to call on people to do that because it gets a bit. It's lovely to have other people's ways of doing a grounding coming into the space. Is there anyone who feels like they would be willing to step into that, not without any notice? Um, and I'm happy to do it if otherwise. Okay. All right. Well, why don't we take like just a few minutes just to arrive together. Um, so just sitting in our chairs and just really knowing that it's our bodies, not just our heads, that are we're bringing to the space. And let's start by putting your feet on the ground so that they're flat, taking a big deep breath in together. And as you feel the air going deep into your lungs, filling your chest cavity, just feel your body that expand. And let's breathe out. And just think back to the last week. We're at the end of the week and all that your body has taken you through. And most of the time, we're just unaware of the breaths that we're taking in, the oxygen freely given to us, the carbon dioxide that we expel as part of the exchange that is going on all the time. The food that comes from the land that we are stewarding in and caring for. It's why we've come together. And let's take another breath in and just as you breathe in, just feel all of that life that was part of where your energy was going this week, coming into your body. And then as you breathe out, let it let it go out into the world to just mingle with all of the other efforts that have been going on. Some of the things that were really positive, some of the things that were really frustrating. Just let it go. And let's take one more breath in. This time it's just going into your body and filling all the way, all through your body, what your body needs, the oxygen joining your blood that now travels down to the tip of your toes, to the tips of your fingers, down your arms. And now breathing out and just feeling just the peacefulness of letting go and just being open and present to each other as we come back into the space. So, welcome. And yeah, so we were just having a little bit of conversation earlier about why this Friday session and how it's different from the classroom spaces. Um, and really, they were an attempt to take all of the content sharing um, out of the classroom spaces so that we could spend more time in conversation, co-creating what needs to happen. And so we felt that going through what the next 4 weeks together in the classroom spaces would look like, so that you have a fairly clear sense of what it is that we are inviting people into and can kind of feel a sense of confidence in those conversations, that you have a handle um, on what that process will look like, and also just so that you have a sense that if there are parts that might be missing, or yeah, that those can also just be we can have a conversation about that. So Brandon's going to outline the next 4 weeks, just the basically the headlines of what those are, and then we'd love to just open it up for conversation about where the questions are, what resources you might have to bring into those spaces. Um, yeah, we really want to um, invite the expertise that's here into a co-creative space in terms of what we can do together. And then the other part that we just really want to um, be clear on is what is it that constitutes a bioregional mapping workshop as opposed to mapping workshops, or as opposed to community building and caring about story of place. And there's just sort of what are those, when is it no longer a bioregional mapping workshop? Each has its place, and not everybody's going to be ready for actually what does it mean to hold um, the components of a bioregional mapping workshop. So just having a bit more clarity around that. So, and we won't get to everything today. It's more just a very high level sense of what is the journey we're going to be going on in the next 4 weeks. So, yeah, so Brandon, I'd love to hand over to you.
Okay. Uh, cool. And thank you. And maybe before we get started, though, I'd love to just take a little minute and check in. Yeah, as Claire said, this session today has two kind of focuses. The first is that we just Taya just shared a new content drop. And so we want to create space for any dialogue, discussion, or questions coming up from that. And then we'll shift focus and then really talk about where are we right now? What are our next 4 weeks? Being very specific and like, here's our next 4 classroom sessions. What do we think they should look like? What are elements and design things that we should bring in? We hosted our first one of these sessions, co-design sessions, a month ago, and it was really nice because also then I think also out of Classroom Zero, we had a lot of like types and formats and structures that have helped guide our classrooms a little bit in trying to open them up or like be more supportive for people's different learning styles. And yeah, So maybe just to start, yeah, we could just kind of go around and did just curious of a survey of how many people were able to check out Taya's recording or content drop. Great. All right. No, that's awesome.
Yep.
Uh, was
Da-
Yeah,
David,
and I would love to just ask if anything, maybe we just start just what's arising from that or any questions. And yeah, sorry, over to you, David.
I was just raising my hand to say, yes, I watched the recording.
okay. Yeah, so great. Wait, yeah.
Um, just a small request. In the recording, she kind of flashes pages that she says, okay, you should review this, you know. And I was spent all too much time looking for that document in that page. And she says it's page 8, 9. So I'm like, 8, 9 of what document? And I'm looking at 8, 9 of all the documents, and I didn't find what she was looking at.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that needs to be
I
written
found
down and not just flashed.
Yeah.
the maps with teeth, but then the
Cool.
actual document with the chapters, I couldn't find it either.
Okay, I'm going to put that into the
So
chat
sorry, you're
too.
saying you couldn't find the maps with teeth video?
No, I did find the maps with teeth. I have the
Okay,
guideline, the
but
guideline,
not the document.
uh, but the other, and I think the maps with teeth is in the guideline, but the other chapters, 5, 6, 7, and 13, I didn't find them anywhere in the resources for part two. Ooh, Dave.
Right, because it's not in there. It's in the mapping field guide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
that's
different
where I
thing.
was looking and I didn't find it in there.
Yeah,
This is great. No,
I
no, this
had
is great
no,
feedback.
yeah.
This is if you can't
Well,
even find it while looking at it, that's
We
it's
we were
huge.
all over the map on that because I had the old one, but I didn't have the new one that she was
So we
referring to.
need to
Yes,
have really well
I have
organized
the old
Great.
one.
resources section
okay.
that's
And
easy
just
to
to provide
access.
some other feedback, I had zero problem finding everything.
Well, David, you're just a stellar dude.
So Dave, were you able to read chapters 5, 6, 7, and 13? And
Sure, I
can you
read
put
those a
a
week or
link
two
in
ago.
here? Yeah,
No,
um,
there-
yeah, I read the map guides a week or two ago also.
okay, it's just those
So
the chapters are in that field guide.
can you
They're
put
not
the link in
separate
here for
documents.
us? Would you
Yeah.
do that
Brandon,
now?
if you could do
Can
that,
you do
but
that?
Yeah, I
Because
can do
you know
that.
where it is.
But
No, I'm
but
asking
also
David to do it.
I don't have that. I downloaded it and I have it on my own computer.
I
hmm.
And
I've I've put the link in the chat to it.
Also though, how did no one point out that Tom made a hilarious "we're all over the map" joke?
yeah,
Just
I
want I
picked
just
that
needed
up.
I just needed to
Yeah,
highlight that. I just need to
thank
highlight
you.
that.
Oh, it's a
Yeah.
pun. Yeah.
And the chapters, just to be clear, are not like separate things. They're just part of the field
Yeah.
guide.
Well, okay, so yeah, let me just, it should be, right? So if we go, sorry, here, actually, maybe I'll do this. I'm going to share my screen and let me see if I can find it. And that's going to be embarrassing if I can't. So I'm just going to share my screen. I'm going to do it analog style. So I have gone into the Landscape Hub Cultivator. I'm going to click on resources. And sorry, here, I can make my screen a little smaller. Um, I see the content drop,
Yep, there it is.
phase two resources. So I think these are the two things that Taya
Yeah.
is referencing. So we have
Yep.
probably have the phase two program guide and then the bioregional mapping field guide for stewards.
Yep.
And it would have been good if we'd hyperlink if
Yeah.
the content drop for now was it was hyperlinked there, but
Good
And
point.
also, I think the confusion though is what because what I have also done, if you've noticed, and then Taya basically, because now it's split between, I also created a shared learning area for bioregional mapping resources where I put my other chapters. And so, what is bioregionalism? What is bioregion, introduction to bioregional mapping, and the field guide. But this is a general field guide, so I can see this could probably create confusion as well. But maybe I'll
Yeah,
put it
and
up here
just to
too.
mention that I was putting this in the chat. I recommend downloading these and
Mhm.
just having them on your computer, and then you can access them at any time. And then I highlight and mark them up and put comments
Mhm.
all over them, and I can do what I want. You can't do that on the
Mhm.
one that's on the Mighty Network.
You have to have a
That's great.
special Adobe program for that. You have to have, you can't do that with a freebie Adobe, I think,
You
for
can, are
PDFs.
you on a Mac?
No,
Okay,
heaven
I don't know.
forbid.
But it's a good point that it could go to a like a Google Doc where people could. I would love it if people added comments directly to it because it's like it's new. It's a first draft. I would love feedback and additions and other things. I mean, this is such a great opportunity to get that from 30 dedicated people. So I would really invite feedback and comments, especially
Do
as
you
we're
ha
going through and doing it and being like, well, that's totally outlandish, or hey, this worked really well.
do you have it in Google Doc?
I'm sure we must, and if we don't, we can make it.
Yeah, I might want to mention that then and share the link the next classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful feedback. Um, yeah, so I wonder if there's any other questions arising right now, or if it would be helpful to just go through what we have thought through for the next 4 classroom sessions, and those are
Well, I think we're
yeah,
still so we're
sure.
not quite there yet, Claire.
Yeah.
So I think we were going to spend just a little time talking about the session guide, but I also just want to echo back before we move. So this is really good feedback, and I think what I'm hearing is that people were all over their map with being able to find it. So when we're doing the content drops, if we're referencing materials, it's just important for us to say what the document is. Yeah, and maybe even where it can be found, like just a reminder of where it can be found. And okay, that's helpful. Any other thoughts? And I'm kind of curious of, yeah, any other thoughts or comments before we move on?
I have a general overall thing about the process, but not specific to what you're calling
Yep.
for right now. It's
Do
kind
you
of a
want
check-in thing.
do you want to go?
Well, I want to respect your agenda.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's okay. Throw it out there, and then we'll see.
Or
I just want to note that it, I feel like there's this huge project that you guys have very carefully planned out about what needs to be done and how, and it feels really like being run over by a train. um, I'm keeping up, like, oh, we're supposed to be talking to people this week and practicing out our elevator speeches. Or, it's like we should have this done, this is what we're supposed to be at. And it's like I just, I'm my plate. We're not there. We're not
Yeah,
there. I know it's okay not to be there. But it also feels like, oh, we're gonna miss out. We're getting so behind. I mean, we're at
yeah,
right now is trying to disseminate these conversations to the rest of the team and trying to get buy-in from our own folks
Yeah.
for doing this, and so I just feel that's a stressor.
yeah,
Claire, I am so happy that you actually named that because I think it's very
yeah,
real. And the thing is that we're not there with you in your community, and we are like Brandon and I when we first started talking about Regenerate Cascadia, we talked about a train the trainer program for bioregional mapping. And really, this is part of that. And actually surfacing where people are at. Let's be real about what the experience is so that we can take that into consideration because there's no, there is a trajectory that we would like to, there is a timing that we were wanting to stick with, and there is reality that keeps hitting. And so if we need to adjust that because that's what the information coming back to us is saying, is pointing to, we would be foolish not to collectively say this stuff is happening. Let's integrate that into the planning and not feel as if there's a rigid decision. When there's consequence, let's take that into consideration. But if there isn't, it actually is just an arbitrary date that we've put onto a timeline. let's consider that. So I just want to say thank you, David.
Yeah, I want to thank Claire for bringing that up as well. I'm not feeling super stressed or anything by what feels like the difference between where we're at and where the curriculum's at. There's like a week or two lag time that's happening here. We haven't even decided who we're going to invite yet, much less
Yeah.
who are the
Yeah.
initial people
Yeah.
that we're going to talk to. And so we won't even talk for another week about who we're going to invite. So we're still on part one. And I can manage that. I think I've already kind of seen that, okay, this is the way it's happening. So I'm going to have to take good notes for things that I'm learning now. And when we get to it, I'll refer to my notes and the recordings and the things like that. So I want to just say the same is true for us for Claire. And I think it would be good to sense into the other groups to see if it's true for them. And I don't know if that means slow down the whole process and stretch it into August or what it means, but I'll leave that in your trusty hands to figure out with our input.
I, yeah, thank you, David. I'm taking off my RC hat. I'm gonna put on my Regenerate Vashon hat. So I just want to make that very clear. I'm just speaking personally now. And Claire's gonna beat me up with Claire A is gonna beat me up with a stick for bringing it down. I just kind of wanted to echo what David is saying and Claire is saying is I find the same to be very true. And I think maybe it's also that we have different teaching styles or learning styles also in like the LHC delivery. But I'll just say, like, where we are in Vashon is in a very good place. We are doing great. Like, we're developed, but we are so not ready to, like, or how do I put this? We are just starting to put down our roots, and we're like our tendrils are going out into the community. We're just starting to open up for the first time publicly. We're starting to do like presentations at other groups, events, and potlucks, and people are starting to actually come to our meetings, and they're really excited about the mapping. But I also feel like we are so far away from being able to hold a mapping workshop in what, like, well, I guess it's like maybe 2 months or 3 months or whatever, but like I feel like that's like what? Like we meet monthly, so it's like that's two meetings away for us, and we're gonna start meeting bi-weekly to speed up the process. But also it's just like I feel like but we also like want to get a website up, and we also like want to table at events and do other things. And so honestly, what we're talking about is like, what can we realistically do in 2 or 3 months? And where we are is like, probably having the conversations, figuring out who we're actually going to invite, getting those people maybe into a room to talk about actually hosting a bioregional mapping, figuring out, and then we're talking about like a lot of like maybe homework, maybe even putting together an atlas ahead of time because there's so many maps already existing and people get confused by that. But actually, we can take what's been done in the past and presently, we can actually, those maps already exist, right? So putting them together and then being really clear on our niche. But I just kind of wanted to echo what David was saying is we're very much still at a phase one where, and I also just want to name more broadly, I don't think any group has confirmed their venue or their date. And we're in May, right? And I think that we can just, I think we just should be open about that because we're talking about like when could we do a real bioregional, like not a network mapping, not a this or that. And for us, it's like maybe October, like and I'm not supposed to say that or bring that up, but I'm speaking from Regenerate Vashon's lens. So like, yeah, I just want to I want to bring, and I just kind of wanted to name too, like for me, having these little homework things where like it's like go do the elevator pitch just wasn't aligning or matching with where we were as a group because we were already doing the community outreach, but it's very delicate and it's like it's more about like, oh, we need to go and even share about what Regenerate Cascadia is, right? Like and introduce and build relationship. Sorry, so that's my personal thing.
Yeah. And that's fantastic that this is what the conversation that's surfacing and needing to happen. Danielle.
Yeah, relationship can be slow, and that's what we're building the rapport with all these people. Um, and I feel like the pressure, we're going to relieve some of that pressure when we set a date and a location. And I want to take the most advantage of learning and doing while you guys have put in this time for this presentation. So it's not like this has to be the big one. I feel, and I feel like I heard that in the presentation from the beginning, like it's just a piece and let's just get the ball rolling. We don't have to be good players yet. We're just starting to practice, and that's enough. So, but I do feel like setting a date, I have been voicing this a lot in my group. Let's set a date, let's set a date, let's set a location, and then we can relax into it and we can create it what within the time scope that we have.
Yeah. Brandon and then David. Oh, did
Great.
you have a response directly or?
Yeah, I just was going to throw out, and also I love this. And so, yeah, after myself and David, we can kind of get back on track. But I think this is so beautiful to actually open all this and surface this. And then we can actually talk about what our next 4 weeks look like in classroom. So I actually think it's
Yeah.
beautiful. And I was just going to say the other element I'd love to throw in is in rhythm for anybody doing the learning journey. The design school is a 6 month learning journey. And this year, Joe and Penny are taking 2 months off, June and July, to go do an activation in the Mississippi. But part of their hope is that people can host local immersions in their landscapes in person in June and July. And that just happens to line up very well also with what we're doing with the bioregional mapping workshops. But maybe it's a less pressured framing, or it's a helpful framing to say that also these bioregional mappings and these conversations can be our landscape immersions where we're just trying to do something in person that's bringing together the community and getting us aligned towards what we're doing. So I'll just throw that in there, not trying to confuse things too much, but just that synergistically that might be a nice framing as well. And David, over to you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's nice to know. Thanks, Brandon. But just to report too that we're moving along with our process, and like I said, we haven't identified our invitees, but we do have a laundry list, and we're going to get down to brass tacks next week to get to the 10 or 15. We have decided 1 day workshop, smallish group, 15-ish people besides us, and a rough guess of, well, we picked 2 dates in July, the 10th and the 17th that we're looking at. Then we'll talk to initial invitees and see if that works, get some feedback. We have a list of about 4 or 5 venues that we're going to look into. So we're in process, we're moving along. So I'm feeling comfortable that we'll be able to pull off an initial 1 day workshop in July. But that won't be enough to get us ready for phase 3. This is a probe for us, and we'll probably do a bigger one maybe in August. We haven't decided yet. And that one will be more cross-sectoral, likely. And then I think we'll be ready for phase 3.
That is so great, David. Sorry, Claire. Hey.
Yeah, no, I love hearing what you're saying, and I want to just surface a concern and just putting it out there because I think it's something we can all, like, it would be good to get that reflection. I think a concern of mine had been, or of in conversations had been, that as a small team, the landscape stewards, all of you, it's a heavy lift to be continually coming to classrooms, putting the time aside and focusing your energy and focus for the period of time that you have to pull off a bioregional mapping workshop. And so just wanting to make sure that we are not dragging this too far out so that that energy dissipates before we get to the place where, like, the bioregional mapping workshop is an opportunity to invite in the community so that you're starting to increase your capacity at a community, at a landscape scale to hold this larger process. So I just want to name that there and to say I take very seriously the emergent information that's coming back, and at our peril, we ignore the reality of the feedback. And I'm not like I just it's not my practice. Like I just push against for pushing something that's not ready. That's just showing that those doors aren't opening in the way that we thought. And so how do we
Well,
dance with that? And
yeah, and
so yeah. And
I,
so just wanting to say there's a sensitivity to that, but I just wanted to surface that the concern and then so that we're all carrying that in the back of our minds that that is something that could happen, but it shouldn't be what's driving how we go forward. And maybe just to finish off before I hand to Brandon is just to say I think that there's something quite lovely about the idea of perhaps some groups, if they are ready, like what you just described, David, to be doing that and sharing back to the group what you're learning so that there is this co-learning that is happening as groups continue to go along. So I think we've all discovered that the co-learning is what's really, I mean, there's lots that's valuable, but the co-learning is really valuable. So, Brandon.
Yeah, well, no, I just wanted to say, David, I think that's so wonderful. I think this idea of doing a one day, workshop, I mean, it could almost be like a bioregional mapping, design day or something, or it's a practice day, or it's a networking, or whatever you're envisioning. I just think it's great. And Taya had a really nice way to talk about this. You called it a probe, and right, it is, right? It's like this little light touch thing. But it gets people in the room. It gets people excited to then push towards this next thing. And I think, yeah, Taya kind of called it what did you call it? Like a sampler of the core processes or something. It's like, and so it's like really it's that dance between MVP, but then also like how are we building in the elements that we need to see, which I think is really great. Um, and I like that just because even just hearing you talk about it in that way, that kind of like as these stepping stones, it kind of does. It helps relieve pressure, and it goes like, right, yeah, of course you can do a one day thing in July, and then get a group of people in the room to do something in August or whenever that might be. So yeah, just appreciative of that. And within that, I think this is actually a great conversation to then surface. I'm going to share my screen a little bit. Um, yeah, just really now. And we get to just talk about maybe we're not ready for it. Maybe we're still in phase one or whatever. But for May, we have four classrooms. We have May 5th, May 12th, May 19th, and May 26th. And I think, yeah, so the purpose of this group today is just to talk about what would we like to see for our next four classrooms. Are there any styles or tactics that we might like to bring in that would help classrooms be more effective? And I'll just read this. This is from the program guide for the phase two. Is just our idea initially had been groups explore the core elements that form the basic scaffolding of bioregional mapping, considering, so really going into the workshop design and process now. So starting to talk about the facilitations, the actual logistics, food, but pulling from both the field guide and sharing existing experience within the cohort and blah blah blah. Good process design enables a lighter touch facilitation style. Once groups have established a draft workshop design, they can now focus on facilitation training and practice. Groups will identify existing facilitation experiences and skills from within their landscapes, learn from each other, rehearse facilitation techniques, workshop logistics, catering, resources, sending invitations. Yeah, and then this is really about like really starting to get into the art of hosting. So really looking at how others may be able to participate. How can your participants actually participate in a variety of ways beyond just attending as a passive participant? So a partner, a co-host. I think actually though we talk about like a church potluck where it's like maybe everybody brings someone brings forks, someone brings spoons. By the end of this section, yeah, we're talking about like let's actually talk about how we're preparing and welcoming our communities into these processes. So within that, I'm going to stop sharing, and but we can really talk about it, and maybe we talk a little bit as an open group. In the past, we also even talked about maybe going into breakouts to design the classrooms, but this is where it gets to really be just an open co-design. Claire Strawn,
Nope.
You're muted,
you're
Claire.
muted.
I have some guys working on my roof, so there's an air blower going on. I didn't want to subject you all to the background noise. I would, first of all, I think it would be nice to kind of have in the classroom a go around about find out for how many of us is this producing something like this the first time they've ever done it. How many have our experienced facilitators, of workshop planning and delivery? I don't know. That'd be a good question to ask. Secondly, I think the focus on the logistics is a little misplaced. I think I would like to spend more time doing things like paired practicing of our elevator speeches,
Right.
or what is the cutting edge of your outreach right now? What are your, just problem solving, direct practicing, using our relationships that we're building in the classroom to prepare us to be in the community.
Yeah, I really like that. The other thing I felt that I wanted to add to what Brandon was saying when is I'd like for this session especially is there's there's two parts to the bioregional mapping workshop that feel really important, and we've talked about it before, but one is creating the conditions for a participatory process, which is really about culture building, creating the conditions for a different kind of co-creative learning with the community. We're inviting in knowledge from the land, typically in our societies left out of the process, which is there's a deeply decolonizing process that if it's not part of what, like creating the conditions for, um, I would argue that bioregional mapping then becomes um, like using because bioregional mapping, and it's happening all over with people with the moniker of bioregionalism. Like lots of people are talking about bioregionalism, but yet they're still very much in the existing system, um, which is someone else defining what those layers are, and so what does it mean for us to be invited into a space where we're bringing the knowledge of the land into the process, including us, in a much more open way instead of a should do way. So, just really wanting to kind of speak to that participatory process, and then the other part is, as I said before, is let's have a clearer understanding. I don't know that it's completely clear, but I think a clearer understanding of what we're talking about by bioregional mapping workshops and um, what kind of no longer really fits into that. Because when we talk about bioregional mapping, people immediately go to mapping and then start talking about asset mapping and certain layers of bioregional mapping. But in fact, there is something that kind of falls within a suite of what we mean by bioregional mapping. And it can get way too fuzzy, and then we just don't know what we're talking about. And it's sort of like holding a kind of a standard of what it is that we're talking about so that it maintains some of the power that it does have. Otherwise, it can get kind of all over the place. And it's not right or wrong. It's just where does it fit in so that you have a sense of what we're working towards. So, Brandon, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, and then I'd love to go to David. Oh, okay. David.
Yeah, there was a lot in there that you just shared, Claire, and I appreciate it. Those two topics, I think we could spend the rest of today and another week on. And I'm a little unclear. I've got two or three things, a little unclear about inviting people into a process. And I think I heard in there that that includes people having input on the design of the workshop itself. Is that what you were saying?
I don't think.
Um,
Oh, sorry.
would you go ahead, Brandon? I can follow.
Oh, I would say actually, I think no, I think what Claire was really saying was like, I think it's important for you and your delivery team to build the scaffolding. But I think what Claire was speaking to is more like we have a westernized, there's a lot of people saying that they're doing bioregional mapping, but then they just come in and create some layers and they're like, here it is, I'm done. And notice how it's a, I'm done.
Sure.
And so I think what you're doing is you're providing a scaffolding in a space. But what we're doing is rather than like defining from the outset, here are the things that we really need to think about and kind of putting it in a top down or from the outside, it's really having a process that we get to let it emerge or through this participatory process, we actually get to like let the land and the layers and the maps that are it's basically it's our process of co-creating with our communities ways of defining and creating layers and maps that exist for and by our communities, right? And so it's like having an open process that we facilitate where that's emerging from.
Okay, that's helpful. I think I might have misunderstood then, so I'm glad I asked for some clarification.
And I should
Yeah,
ask Claire A, did I do an okay job of saying that or did I miss it?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And it's hard to talk about this. I'm just going to say that. It's a deeply and I maybe we should even have a conversation about what do we mean by decolonize. But it's a deeply decolonizing a process. So that, and maybe I will just say this, is that when we understand that our worldviews, our systems have been designed in a particular way, it means that all of the processes that come out of that usually kind of create the existing system that we have. And so, how do we interrupt that? And how do we start to take back what so the decolonizing process is like actually we're that agency has been taken away from us when somebody else decides what our landscape is. And so this is about giving agency back to and opening that up for people. And it's not an easy thing. It's actually probably going to take
mm,
generations to really get to that place. But we need to make it, we really need to be practicing and working together on how do we create those spaces
mhm,
that allow that collective potential to be realized and and people be invited in. So yeah,
right.
and so excuse me if
Okay,
I am confusing it with the language that I use. It's not straightforward language to it's not, but we'll as we fumble together forward, I think we'll get clearer together.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's helpful. And I think partly what's coming up for me is I'm glad I haven't had experience with other bioregional mapping processes because the ones you're describing that are kind of top down, I don't have any experience with. So that's not even entering my mind. We get to start fresh and design something without any influence of a previous process, except wherever we've experienced in previous in our life, unconsciously bringing it forward into this process. So yeah, it's something to be aware of. And for me, what pops up is decision making. After you get all these people in the room, how do you do a decision-making process that is clear, transparent, doesn't have bias built into it, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm already thinking in the back of my head that governance and decision-making is fast coming forward as importance in our work. And so delving into that would be great. Um,
Exactly, David. I'm glad that you're thinking that, and just it's hard not to overwhelm people, but it's absolutely a huge part of this and will
mhm,
uh, be coming in. So
yeah.
anyway,
So
Claire.
then the second part, just to finish up.
David, there is a queue.
Oh, but there is a queue, but I did mention when I spoke that there were two or three things that I'd like to mention, and I've only mentioned one. So we could just
Yeah.
do one each time, and then we can come back.
Whatever.
Why did we let
Yeah,
David carry
that's
on?
fine. I've taken up enough airspace.
Thank you. I appreciate you. So I appreciate Claire trying naming and trying to take on and decolonizing and deconstructing the systems that we engage. Um, and how I approach that question is to, one, be sure we have the right people in the room, as we've been discussing, but then let them that have them give prepared ask them to share their perspective, and so they're naming the layers, they're naming the important issues, they're naming what regeneration means to them, they're naming all of this, not us saying, okay, here are the layers, how do you fit in? But who's here, and what do you bring, and what is then, and summarizing, pulling together, what is the whole picture that we have as a group. That's how I would approach it.
Yeah. I'm going to respond to what you've just said. Is what we maybe should have done was just, so the first class, so that is very much the focus that we're thinking for the first classroom, where we talk about introducing processes like the art of hosting. It's not the only one, but like how do we, and sort of bringing the wisdom in from the room of how do we create a good space. So really sort of feeling into that together is so creating the conditions for those processes. So just so that you know.
I was talking about the actual workshop, not the classroom.
No, but this is in the classroom. It's like, as a group, what are the considerations that we need to be bringing in? What would you do? And sourcing the wisdom of how would you create the conditions in the workshop. So it's like these, as design, with you wearing your designer hats, how are you creating the design for the workshop? That would be the first one. And then really starting to look at what goes into the next three classrooms, going into what goes in, what do we need to be considering in order to not overwhelm ourselves, but to bring in terms of scope for the actual layers of the bioregional mapping workshop that we want to handle together. But starting out by creating the conditions that allow people to enter that space in a co-creative, participatory way. So, Brandon.
Great. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think we've got three different layers of kind of topics emerging. I think one is kind of a higher level, more, kind of that theoretical, what are the things we need to bring in? What's decolonization mean? I think then there's how do we want to bring this into our next four classrooms? And then there's also another one, which is like, what's emerging in our workshops that we need to be present. And those obviously intermingle. David, I also think I really like what you said about once people are in the room, how do we practice decision making, the governance? It's fast coming. And I would even throw that back a little bit I wonder also then if it's not less about decision making and more about how do we reach a consensus or a consent towards like a restorative vision or a unifying goal. And so, because maybe it's like we don't need to make all the decisions together, but if we can agree on the shared language, if we can get that base for what does regeneration mean in our landscape, maybe that's helpful. And I'd actually like to pass it back over to David to hear your second point. And then I'd also love to just focus people a little bit more on these are great conversations. Claire Strawn, you've done a really good job. You're like, in these classrooms, I really want to focus on the or on problem solving and getting the expertise. And I'd love to invite people more of like into that space of like, yeah, what do we want to see for our next four classrooms, and how that relates to our workshop. But yeah, David, I'd love to hear from you for your second point.
Thanks, Brendan. And I appreciate that clarification. Consent around some of these broader things is important. And decision making is sort of a concrete thing I see coming in phase 3 when we start setting up groups of people to make decisions about flow funding and all of that. And consent can be very much the way we do that. But the only other thing I was going to share is back to what you said earlier in the meeting and reiterated once or twice, Claire, that it's good for us to get a parameters of what is a bioregional mapping workshop and what's not, but not even be too rigid about that. Because I'm already hearing, even with our group, some things that in my brain are more just like general community building. And community building and relationship is part of a workshop. And um, but can you do that while also doing mapping? Or is community building just very broad and you do whatever it takes to build community and relationships? So I think that's something we'll be exploring. So to hear more from your perspective, RC's perspective, what kind of fits in and what doesn't, and what kind of mix of the above, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And whether it's now or when you're ready for it doesn't matter to me.
And I will just say, David, um, we didn't want to overwhelm people by bringing in some of those pro-social and sociocracy, and there's a whole toolbox of things
Mhm.
because really, um, all through what we've been doing till now has actually been pulling in some of these processes, but not necessarily naming them. But there is a sense that we're building, how do we work together? How, like at the heart of when we, instead of saying governance, because sometimes governance can be a trigger. I think I've said this before. It's like, how do we cooperate well together? How do we coordinate and collaborate to actually do the stuff? And how do we hold accountability? Those are all really critical parts of governance. And yeah, and how do we make decisions together? So uh, we're doing all of those things right now. But then going into it a lot more with a lot more focus on sort of basically let's look inside under the hood of how we do that well. Will certainly be things that we need to go into, but yeah, I just want to say that those pieces are built in all the way through. There needs to be a consistency, but I think right now it would be really helpful for us to just focus a bit on like what constitutes bioregional mapping and when are we starting to kind of get into the community building, creating, getting ready towards bioregional mapping. So, um, yeah, Brandon.
Yeah, and at this point, I would love to also maybe invite a space for maybe people who have not talked as much, but also specifically, I see a very interesting and lively dialogue happening in the chat, and I'm wondering if Danielle or Shapit, or sorry, Genevieve, if either of you would like to share a little bit.
Uh, let's see, what was I? I guess one thing I was saying, like the governance stuff, I actually think that like I'm a little confused because I thought that phase three has something to do with like everybody deciding together how to spend the money, but if we don't have like how our organization works, like it actually has to be a little bit more solid, I think. The sociocracy part. Like I don't know how to like so I was just saying I think that's a whole year program is actually how do you develop your agency. Yeah. Um yeah. So and then the mapping I'm still not sure. I mean I keep brainstorming. The AI helps me brainstorm a little bit and I keep thinking like, well, what do you ask the people in the room? Like what are you asking them? And I keep thinking like maybe it's just that you ask them like what do you know about the area, not like we're mapping it so that we know it, so that we know where the boundaries are, or we know where this is, but like we're just showing what we know in the room. Because I don't know how to ask people to, it's hard for me to, I mean, like, it seems like experts would be the ones that would know, like, well, there's this many fish, like, right? So that you get these different answers, right? Like, I don't really want to know the details on exactly how many fish are in. I mean, maybe that's, but like, more like I know that I want or I buy food from the CSA down the road. Maybe that's what I know. Like I just don't know how to ask the right questions.
That's great. And I think there might be a little element of both, right? Like in sense of like one is yes, you're getting the knowledge in the room and like what's important to be aware of. And then I am thinking though that maybe it is about like what does a regenerative future for the Skagit area Valley look like? Because now you've got all the experts in the room and you're kind of figuring that out, right? So you get the fish person talking with the
But this is
pesticide
like
person.
2 years from now. Like I don't know, like how do I call those people right now and know who they are? It seems like I might get a farmer and I might get a there's a fish guy that's retired that lives around the corner that I know. Like how do I
Yeah, it's kind of like finding those people that are the gateway. Like, so we had this guy Steve, who was kind of our key into a bunch of other stuff. He's the executive director of Zero Waste Vashon, but he came to our landscape showcase, which we were very lucky for. And then he got super excited and he started like connecting us with people, right, and emailing and pulling them in. And it's kind of like you have to find, yeah, I don't know. So that was helpful for us. I'd love to open that up though, of seeing how other people have. I think that's a great question. So yeah.
Just a quick response to that. I think it's our general intention to start small with people we know and then ask them for the second one. Who are one or two people you think should be part of this conversation that could be helpful towards this goal? And we, expand from there. And fortunately, too, we have two people who are pretty well connected throughout our landscape, and I'm getting pretty well connected as well. And so I don't think we're going to have too much of an issue. The people we're not well connected with are your more traditional farmers and foresters and those people, which personally I do think should be part of the process and to really get a cross perspective mix in the room. Um, but we're not super well connected with them. And it's always difficult if it looks like this is a process, a bunch of liberals and progressives, they tend not to want to show up and things like that. So that's tricky territory for down the road.
So I just want to first preface what I want to say by saying Brandon and I haven't delivered a bioregional mapping workshop together. We've and we've got slightly different approaches. So and we've been going, pretty hard at all of the materials and what have you. And I'm realizing, wow, this will be interesting to see how the different approaches come out. So I'm just prefacing this with that because um, it is there's a level of vulnerability in what we're doing, and there is a essentially desire to bring out what it is that's generative. So anyway, in that spirit, I'm just going to share this is that for me, what's really helpful is really digging into like what is it that creates a sense of belonging, a sense of identity in a particular landscape. And people, that goes to a very embodied level of and then surfacing, like getting people to share those stories. Like what is it about that place that and people do have stories, and often the arts are really, really good for this. For pulling those things out. I mean, yeah, so and there are symbols. Like I think of those things eventually start to become symbolic. Often people will start to surface similar things in a landscape. And and then I think that then becomes sort of anchor points around which to even think about what are the layers that need to be focused on, because essentially I'm going to extrapolate, but those become the sacred things that you want to protect. That when you have a strong sense of identity, you can get a Walmart coming in with an application to maybe a small place and saying, we're going to bring jobs and economic, growth and all of the things that usually are shiny and that get them the development permit they want. A community that understands what is sacred. I have seen those communities just say, absolutely no way, and this is why not, because it will destroy the thing that we care about because they can see where that's going. So when you appeal to the thing that actually people really care about, and then start to build layers around if you have a better understanding about how this fits together in whole systems, in a whole landscape flow, it starts to give you a sense of how do we care for what we care about most. Anyway, the reason why I'm bringing that in is that to me, that helps to add focus around how I would then discern which layers to bring in or not. And I'd love to hear Brandon's.
Yeah, no, I might just jump in and say I think that's really powerful. Literally, it's like surfacing how we're protecting the sacred. What is the sacred? It actually lets the community come together to map that. Yeah, no, I think that's, yeah.
You got muted, Claire. There you go.
And it bridges political
Oh,
divides,
yeah,
usually.
and I think too, yeah, and this actually, you all are surfacing something else that's really important, which is I think again, and actually this goes right into our classrooms, which is yeah, how are we scaffolding and how are we creating the conditions that help us lead to the outcomes that we need? Because, as Shapit said, right, like if the framing's not right, we could spend all year just focusing on our group. And it's kind of like that with the bioregional mapping. It's like if the sample size is too small, you'll get a very limited response, like limited frame or window. And so really it's like about how it's like how do we set up, how do we cultivate, how do we get the right people in the room? And then Claire Strawn, I think you were saying this is then and then how do we know kind of the right questions to ask that help guide us and let that emergent process really there. And so it really is important to have this idea of like kind of scaffolding or and then Claire A, you were talking about this of really knowing yeah, what are the things that makes a bioregional mapping workshop a little bit different from these other things? And then being very clear on that so we can know what's the probing, what's the initial conversations versus what's the actual mapping workshop. So I think this is all great, surfacing lots of good stuff. But yeah, Danielle.
You're muted there.
Hmm. I can wait and go after Genevieve. I just have something I wanted to share, but it kind of it's overall. So
No, go ahead. I was going to change the topic too. You're welcome to, or slightly.
okay, okay, great. So I'm thinking of like okay, so and like outdoor rec planning. So this is how I kind of see it. You want to front load people. You have a one you can have it boil it down to a one-page plan of what your inputs are, what your purpose is, similar to, you know, some of what guidelines you guys have been giving us. So but in the outdoor rec, it can be therapy, it can be growth, or it can be government planning. So I'm imagining the workshop as a one activity that you're putting on. It can be really long, it can be really small, it can be all these things. It can be multi-course layered. But my point is that you 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 set it up and you can look at it like the mountain speaks for itself. That's one of the languages. Like you bring them to the land and you see what comes up for them. You're not walking through the process at all. Like you're not walking them through. There's a range. You could let the mountain speak for itself, or it could be completely involved, completely therapeutic, where you have this whatever patron sort of weird, like I'm helping them walk through this. That's a range. Does that make sense? So you have the workshop, you're like, we have the introduction to biomapping or whatever, right? We can walk them through it. We can help them paint the picture of what their community is, or we can just bring them to the land and let them create. You know, we could have that drawn out ahead of time, right? Here's some paper. This is the activity we're going to do. And then see what comes from that. So do you see where I'm relating to what we're talking about? And do you see Does that make sense?
I'm hearing that it's a process of um, of many different parts. Is that what you like, the experiential as well as the
It's
um,
like, okay, so when I say outdoor rec, I mean, yeah, designing an experiential activity in nature for people. So there's 100 ways you
yeah,
can do that, but I see the mapping process as doing that. And how much are we going to walk them through it versus present and get their feedback and let them create something? And I feel like by letting them, we're not letting them create anything, but we're just doing
inviting them.
that is enough. Like,
Yeah. I would love Darren maybe to speak up here. He was over at my place. We did a really short, like, testing out a friend of mine's process for bioregional mapping, but where we went when Benji did that, the story of the bioregional mapping, and we went through looking at some of the bioregional mapping layers, not even actually, it wasn't even a proper bioregional mapping workshop, but it was sort of starting to surface different layers of the map. But we finished off by asking, what is it that the land wants? And then went on to a piece of land where a question was being considered. And I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot, Darren. And if you don't feel like talking to it, it's fine. I'm happy to say but you were there, so I just would love to hear if you have any reflections. You know what I'm talking about, right? Or not?
Yeah. I mean that that was a while ago. So yeah, it's just remembering it now though. And um yeah, I mean I did like kind of going on like kind of yeah, like the physical kind of a field trip aspect of it, like kind of like visiting the land and um yeah, kind of inviting in the perspective of the land as um you know, uh, yeah, like what does the land want? Um, I do really like that. Um, like in my recent art project, like it was about kind of inviting that question in terms of like the dreams, like the dream world, like what's the dreams of the land and so yeah, I mean, I kind of like that as a framing and kind of with the understanding that like we're part of the land, right? Like so like we're like the land is kind of, acting and speaking through us in a way.
Yeah. No, thanks, Darren. Maybe I'll just add that what I recall, and you said this, but it's just what was really powerfully stood out to me was that each one of us that went onto that land each had a very different um, understanding from what we had just done when we were having conversations. Like it really shifted. Like each of us felt a, a kind of different kind of consciousness being on the land as opposed to just the conversations. And I just wanted to bring that in, that it was that it felt really powerful and a really important part of the process. So that the
I'm
land actually
confused. Aren't we always on the land? What do you mean by being on the land?
going into the place where we were talking about like a vision and a dreaming together, but on
Are you
in a
talking
sense
about
on
a,
paper,
a guided spirit
conceptually.
journey? Are you talking about
She's
sitting in the
getting the
woods?
drugs. She's doing drugs.
Actually physically walking into the spaces we were talking about, as opposed to talking about them. We were
In a
there
conference room. Yeah.
in a more relational way. Yeah. Anyway, maybe we can move on. Genevieve.
It struck me. Maybe this isn't a good comment for right now, but so if I went to build a regenerative plan for Skagit County, I would take down the dikes and let the river run naturally and move into tiny houses up on the hill in the winter. And like, so like, I don't think we're not really talking about a real regenerative plan, right? We're talking about some halfway thing. I mean, we'd have to cut out all the cars and like,
Yeah. Mhm.
anyway.
I think that 500-year vision is one of the most powerful things we can do. Because once you have it, right, like, and the key there is that because what you're doing is that's exactly right, right? Like, what does a true regenerative vision for that area look like? And it means taking down the dikes. How the fuck do you take down the dikes? That's a huge thing. So, but what you do is you start getting all these people in the room, and what's nice about a 500-year vision is you don't need to have the details about it, but if you can all agree on, oh yeah, that's what a regenerative future looks like, then it becomes very interesting that you start talking about how actually do you start to move in those directions where it's like, how would you ever talk about a future where the dikes are removed? You know, like, and that is actually a really cool framing question that might be fun.
Totally. Actually, I would love to just bring in because this was such a strategically smart way of going was for Barker Creek. They developed a 100-year plan for daylighting Barker Creek and returning it. And all the municipal groups all felt that they were quite comfortable signing on to the plan because it was a 100-year plan and it wasn't going to land in their, on their watch, that they would have their feet held to the fire. And it was beautiful, and it's like, this was, yeah, when Darren talks about the land dreaming, it's like, what do we dream of? How are we surfacing that? So that is the bioregional mapping. It's like starting to look into how does the land work? How is it being changed by, sort of human intervention? What is it like, what does it mean for this land to work as a whole system in a healthy way? And so, yeah, the dreaming is really important. That comes through the bioregional mapping. But strategically, every single municipality signed on because it was safe to do that. And so, but it meant that the plan actually got adopted and incorporated. So I just wanted to put that in there that it like maps with teeth, like that is um yeah, it was just smart. Um
Yeah, I think, and I would just like to say too, I think so. There's nothing wrong with like an emergent bioregional mapping workshop, right? And again, I just kind of go to like this is the difference between the bioregional mapping workshop I'll give in the design school, where I'm like, go host emergent mapping things, make seasonal wheels, do things that are community building, versus like so in this cohort with our 10 landscape groups, because I think RC is trying to like I just say as our kind of as our DNA or the pilot that we're trying to build out is working in concert together to with a little bit of a different goal. And so my question is always like if we just went out onto the land and had this emergent experience, does that get us to where our groups need to be to kind of like model and try and get the regeneration strategy or the decision-making process, for funding to be able to flow that sees people resourced? And maybe that's the first step, or maybe different groups try different things. But I will just take it to every landscape group. I think that's a conversation to have is why are we mapping? Because that'll also help cut out the noise that I will just say that we are awash. And this is something very important is we do not have a lack of maps currently, right? Like we are not in a lack of maps. So we actually have too many maps. And the why we map actually helps us cut through the noise of like what do we need to actually bring into the room and talk about and process. And I really think that idea of the scaffold, it's like what scaffolding are we building for this emergent process to happen that also leads to our goal. And whatever that goal is, helps define why we map. Okay, I'm a broken record. I'll stop.
I want to speak to classroom sessions. Um, we did the showcase, and it would be really helpful to me to maybe have a breakout session to have a conversations about what is the leap from the showcase, what we presented in the showcase as a baseline to um, where we're trying to go with the mapping. Because our team is very much about how do we, as human beings, survive in this natural world in a way that regenerates the natural world rather than extracts and depletes from it. How do we provide for the basic human needs, that people are suffering about, in a way that is regenerative? And, that's not wandering around the fields having dreams. That's like, how do we feed and house people in a way that also protects the forests? And I feel like there's a nitty-gritty there that I don't want, that I would like to have addressed.
Yeah, how do we live responsibly and ethically in place? I mean, that's like, where
Uh,
people's needs are provided and we're not destroying the environment. It's
Right.
like, yeah.
Yeah. I I would love us to just focus a little bit before we finish on um maybe where we're what are we talking about with bioregional mapping when it starts to not really hold but what is the difference between mapping and bioregional mapping? Like where do we start to recognize that we're into just mapping? And yeah,
Well,
Brandon,
project planning. How do you divide between project planning and bioregional mapping?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And maybe if Brandon could just maybe start off and I'll add, and then I think others as well, but just so that we're talking about, or do you want me to start off there and then you add to that, Brandon?
Well, it would also maybe be good to check in. I mean, we've got 10 minutes left in this session. So are there things that we need to cover? I mean, these are also things that we could take to the classroom, right? That might be an excellent thing to take to the classroom. But I want to create just a little bit of space because I think we've also been doing a lot of talking. So would love to just open it up. And I'm happy to also talk to that too. I just wanted to check in. 10-minute check.
I'm just wondering if there's anything we can do to get closer to the goal that this meeting was supposed to have in the beginning. That's all I.
Yeah.
I wonder too, like, so would it be helpful of like, so yeah, I would love to, like, one, how does Friday, I mean, obviously Friday works for us because we're here. But is this an okay time? Is this not a good time? The other thing that, after our class 2 weeks ago, we actually invited, Corey kind of piped in and Corey's like, hey, that was out of order. I've got recommendations. And then we actually invited Corey to kind of like join us on a planning session on like a Thursday or a Monday or a Tuesday. I can't remember. But I'm kind of wondering if there wouldn't be interest in something like that, where it's like rather than here's our block where we're planning for our next 4 classrooms and it's very top level, like would people be interested in something like that where we meet like the day before the classroom and talk about what's up or yeah, I don't know. What do people want to see or like what's helpful or is
Well,
this good?
yeah, thanks, Brandon. What I'm seeing happen, and I've seen this happen before, is that we come with this intention of getting practical and planning for ahead, but then all these big picture issues come up, and we spend 85% of our time on those. Because I think it's hard for us to wrap ourselves around the details until we have a bigger, better picture of the big picture. And I don't know if that's just a matter of what the human brain does. It goes to the problems and it wants to deal with those first, and it can't let go of them until it does. And we can just simply get more disciplined about that. Or if they really do need to be addressed before we can, get into the nitty gritty. So here I am just raising
Yeah.
questions,
I,
not getting practical.
I think that's
Um,
really helpful, David. I feel like coming away from this session, you need to feel better equipped to being able to have conversations with your community about what it is that we're moving towards and ahead of the classrooms where we'll be going into the details. And that's where I felt like just you having a little bit of a sense of what makes bioregional mapping, and you can actually distinguish between what asset mapping and other kinds of mapping are. And yeah, Brandon. So that's
Oh,
why I just want us to focus a little bit more on, and I've got some specific things to add in. So Brandon, I
so
know that.
Yeah, that to me though is actually like it would be good to clarify because to me that actually is not the point or purpose of this session. That is a divergence, I think, in terms of like what we're trying to get out. Like the goal of this to me, like that to me would be a classroom issue, right? Because we want our entire cohort equipped to be able to talk better about what we're doing and talk to their communities. This is a very small group, and that's kind of it's intended to be a small group that kind of helps facilitate and co-design the classrooms, which is an internal process amongst ourselves. So I just thought, sorry, so I just also wanted to just name, I think that's a little bit of a difference in goal, which, at some point we could suss out or not.
I appreciate that. So,
Yeah, Danielle, that's also a very good question. So last what are we calling it? Phase. We had on Fridays we would actually do like we called them like content delivery sessions or something, and that was like a slide presentation. And we did that because we didn't want the slide presentation to be a part of classrooms. Because we thought we wanted classrooms to be more open and co-creative and discussion space and learning. And so we would have these sessions. But we got feedback, and so we wanted to try that actually these content delivery sessions didn't need to be on Fridays. We didn't need to be like, everybody come join them. But actually they could be recorded. And so this phase, we are trying to record them, and then we like do a content drop. And that's actually a good point too, is that then Friday was meant to be a place where we could discuss it. And then also though wanted to then think we also wanted to really try this idea of a classroom co-design where we invited people from the cohort to actually help us design. So it's not just us blowing out or like that we're actually doing real-time learning and iteration and feedback. So that's our and we kind of mixed and mashed both of those things into this Friday session. And we are always open to being iterative and learning and figuring out what's working for people and how we can do it better.
Do you feel like your needs were met by this meeting today?
I, I I'll tell you what, I'm feeling as if there's something I'd like to communicate before we finish, because this is the part that I'm wondering if this is going to be helpful. Bryony Penn, when she and I've talked about this before, said when they go into communities and they do bioregional mapping workshops, she's known as Dottie because she's helping them connect the dots. And to me, bioregional mapping are enough layers that you're starting to see patterns in the landscape that connect, that have meaning because, that was invisible before. We've now connected the dots. We can start to see these whole systems. So it could be, Polyora was talking about indigenous sovereign, no, was talking about food sovereignty. And what does it mean on an island to have food sovereignty when you actually can't produce enough food? You have to start looking beyond the island. So now you've got transportation routes, you've got distribution points for the food to be collected. But what does it mean when you've got food sovereignty where you're looking at there's mapping that goes on with that. And when is it? So anyway, so just kind of bringing in at a very large sort of scale level that it is much more about those patterns and what's going to be useful for what you want to focus on. So Brandon.
Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of, and again, so we're like, I think we have 4 minutes left. And so, yeah, and I think this is different, there's a difference, right? Where Claire is talking about like what's needed in a bioregional mapping workshop, but also then it's like we need to be talking about what are we actually building into the classrooms. Claire S., I really liked your question. Are we getting what we needed out of these sessions? I think that's a really good question. And what I would just say is, I don't know. Maybe I think what we need to I think sorry. So it's a really good question. It's really interesting framing I hadn't thought about. What we need to get out of these sessions is what we have learned is that we have a very diverse cohort in terms of their needs and learning styles. And so I think what we need help with is making sure that we are delivering content and holding spaces in a way that works for as many people as possible. And I think we've started to do that pretty, like, it's nice. I think there's been a shift, and I feel like in the last couple of weeks we've been trying new things and we're kind of getting there. But we could really just use more help because I think we learn in different ways. And so finding ways that really work for different people and making sure that we're bringing that in, making sure that we're doing the prep work ahead of time so that people have enough advance notice, making sure that we're building in enough structure, making sure that we're not building in enough structure to keep it open and emergent. Yeah, and that's I think our evaluation was so fun because it really, like, we have pie charts where it is just so, it really visualizes, like, people have different needs and it's really fun and cool. Yeah, so just, yeah, I think that's where we need help though, is making sure that we're building that into our classrooms and other spaces.
Thanks for that, Brandon. I don't know if many of you know about my background, but I was a teacher and my master's degree is in holistic and transformative approaches to classroom education, classroom-based environmental education. And it's hyper challenging in the classroom. If you're really wanting to address what you're talking about, Brandon, it's a high demand on teachers to do it.
Oh, yeah.
And what it ends up being is numerous short ways of learning that the teacher facilitates that addresses the different learning styles. So I think you're doing the right thing by asking us and for each of us to get super clear on the way that we learn and what we can communicate to you. So that's on us to do that. And at the same time, to be careful not to assume that that's the way other people learn. Which is I learned that the hard way as a teacher. I assumed my teachers learn and my students learn like I did until it hit me in the face that that's not true. They need something else. So I play around in this territory with you more if you'd like, but well, we're running out of time here.
Yeah. And maybe just to put a final thing is, and just to build on that, David, is just to say, I think what stands out to me is it's really important to have the artists and the community artists in the room who are good at helping to connect the dots and whose minds often do work in whole system. Not everybody's going to work like that, but who are the people whose minds work in whole systems ways? Because to have more strength in that in the room is very helpful to everyone.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I would love if we could afford it to have one of those graphic artists, wall note takers in the room when we do our bioregional mapping. Those are so awesome and they're costly. And that's quite a skill for people to do that. But the
100%,
graphically,
but it could just be inviting them into the room to be as participants and just
yeah, if we can,
signaling to them that their presence is important because the artists are longing to be, when you speak to, are longing to be actually um, leaned into for what their gifts are. And
agreed.
that's been left out of our whole way of doing things in Western societies.
Well,
And
it's
so
definitely one of the
helping them
sectors.
understand their role and validating that is one of the most powerful things you can do.
But
And it
but
adds.
but also I'll just say that that is what your budget. That's why we're hoping, do feel free to use your budget on that because supporting artists is also good.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's true, but it's not just producing content. It's their actual presence because that will come out in lots of other projects. So there's both.
Well, there's a both. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they may overlap and they may not.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, we are at 12 o'clock, 12:01. So thank you, everybody. Please be very open to reach out, feedback, input. I did create that Google Drive, Google Doc where I've been taking notes. Please do feel, I'm just going to share it one last time. Do feel free to leave any notes, thoughts. I tried my best, but I struggled to keep up with all of the great conversation. So
Thanks for
do feel
doing that,
free to.
Brandon. Okay. All right, everyone. I've got to jump too. So thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.